Welcome to Biologica. I'm Dr. Susan, a veterinarian and a marine educator from Maine. On this show, we'll be exploring the many ways that animals and humans interact and that society and nature intersect. Please visit my Patreon or my Podbean page to support the show or to suggest future episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the episode today. Thanks for listening.
Like a traction engine.
Welcome to today's episode of Biologica about smushed-face dogs or brachycephalic dog breeds. This episode is inspired by a new puppy that we rescued or adopted from the shelter setting, who is one of those little smush-faced dogs, a Boston Terrier. He's actually going to inspire two episodes, this one about that kind of breed, which is rising in popularity and very common these days. Second of all, he's going to inspire an episode next time about raising puppies, and we'll talk with a trainer and behavior specialist for that episode. Today we'll be talking about the history of these breeds, what's sort of special or unique about them, both in a positive way, why they're popular, but also challenges they can face in a medical sense. And we'll be chatting with a wonderful clinical veterinarian, Dr. Mark Hanks. And we'll also look at some of the news and controversies surrounding them and finish off with a poem related to them. Along the way, you'll also get to meet Pippin, the little puppy at my house, and hear some of the special little sounds that he makes as part of being a smush-faced dog. I'm here with our little Boston Terrier puppy. He's napping next to me, and I'm going to see if we can hear the sounds he makes when he's napping. He has one of those little smushed faces called brachycephalic or short head. On Merriam-Webster, brachycephalic is defined as short-headed or broad-headed. In other words, having a sort of short or smushed head or face. And you can probably already picture dogs you've seen or perhaps have snoozing on your own couch right this moment that face this description. The history of the smush-faced or brachycephalic dogs goes back for centuries and even thousands of years. The history is quite diverse, and just to highlight a couple examples, we have an article on the AKC or American Kennel Club website about bulldog history, and the title is Bulldog History from Medieval Fighters to Lovable Companions. As you can guess from the name, the English bulldog's beginnings were fighting bulls. And this was why they were bred to be quite tough and broad. Part of why they have that short face is it was thought to be helpful in fighting bulls. And later they transitioned to being companion animals.
Tigers on a gold leash, we don't care. We aren't caught up in your love affair, and we'll never be royal. It's a run in our blood. That kind of luck's just ain't for us.
On quite a different end of the spectrum of why another breed was bred with that smushed face are pugs. Pugs are one of the oldest dog breeds, and they originated around 400 BC. They were bred as companions for emperors and nobility, and the reason for that smushed face is that breeders very carefully tried to create wrinkles in the face that created the symbols for wealth and status. In one place, I read that the wrinkles on the face looked like a character for the word prince, and another place I read that the character or meaning of the wrinkles was the characters symbolizing luck or prosperity. The smushed face was more of a designer status symbol that actually spelled out the words for how elite of a breed they were considered to be. From their origin in ancient China, they went on for centuries and centuries to be associated with luxury companions for Buddhist monks and for European nobility. And so they've always been associated with that luxury royal setting.
If all of the kings had their queens on the throne, we would pop champagne and raise a toast to all of the queens who are fighting alone. Baby, you're not dancing on your own.
Boston Terrier is another example of quite a new breed, and it is sometimes nicknamed the American Gentleman. It comes from the 19th century in Boston, Massachusetts. It's a mix between a now extinct terrier and an English bulldog. One individual in 1870, Robert C. Hooper of Boston, purchased a dog and bred it with another and created the original lineage of the Boston Terrier. And that is actually the breed of the little puppy I've adopted.
She said, I think I'll go to Boston. I think I'll start a new life. I think I'll start it over. No one knows my name.
What I love about these examples is how they really highlight how diverse these smushed-face dogs are, ranging from medieval fighting dogs that have evolved to be companions now to the sort of royal lineup of ancient little smush-faced dogs in China that have sat on the laps of many royal lineages over millennia. Amazingly, recent archaeological findings show that early Romans bred dogs with flat faces. Within the last few years, a team of researchers looking at the remains of a dog that was discovered in a tomb in present-day Turkey discovered that the dog had the features of smushed-face breeds like we've been talking about. They said that the skull was actually similar to that of a French bulldog, which is a common and very popular breed today. This finding is actually the oldest brachycephalic breed ever documented and discovered, and it shows how ancient these pet-like little dogs went back in history. As an interesting side note, the way the dog was buried in the tomb and some of the evidence they found suggested that it had a high social status and was likely a beloved companion of the deceased human individual, which isn't the focus of today's episode, but is kind of interesting how long these cherished little companions go back. So from origins in at least ancient Rome to medieval fighting dogs and also royal companions in China, these little flat-faced dogs go back centuries to even millennia and were bred for a number of different reasons. And today, even though they have very diverse origins, they share some common medical challenges. And so we'll be digging into that and some of the controversies surrounding these today. Let's talk with Dr. Mark Hanks about these brachycephalic breeds. I'm here with Dr. Mark Hanks, who has worked as a veterinarian in companion animal medicine and, amongst other things, owned the Kindred Spirits Veterinary Clinic for 15 or 16 years in the Bangor area, and is now the guiding light veterinarian and my mentor at Animal Refuge League. Thanks for coming on the Biologica podcast, Mark.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Great. It's so fun to talk about this with you. So we're going to talk a little bit about brachycephalic dogs or smushed-face dogs.
That's what I call them.
I think about, like the pugs, the English bulldogs. What am I forgetting?
Boston Terriers.
Frenchies. They seem to have really grown in popularity.
I heard a couple years ago they're like the most popular breed.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing.
Like they beat labs one year.
Wow. I'm so surprised because I do remember in vet school, like somebody said, hey, there's a Frenchie in the medical unit. Everyone, come look at it. Cause, we just didn't see them very much. And how could I have forgotten Boston Terrier? Because this episode is actually inspired because I have become an adopter of a Boston Terrier puppy from Animal Refuge League, who's
Yes.
he is adorable. So I've been thinking a lot about their medical aspects and also a little bit about what draws us to them. Why are they so popular? But before we get into some of the medical issues that can crop up with these little short-nosed dogs, can you describe a little bit about, like, anatomically what's going on with them? Because I feel like we get used to seeing them. We see them on the street, we see them in ads for dog food, we see their pictures in cartoons and movies. And so we're like, "Oh yeah, that's that kind of dog." And can you describe a little bit about what's going on with their heads, the way we've selectively bred them and their skulls and their noses that sort of
Right.
makes them unique?
Right. So yeah, we have definitely chosen this. This is not something that developed by natural selection. And there's a lot of them. There's several, there's a lot of breeds that are brachycephalic. So smush-faced dogs are very common. In fact, we see it in cats too.
Mm,
And
mhm,
and we've chosen it, and basically what we've chosen for is foreshortening of the jaw and the face.
mhm,
So there's a couple of sequelae to that. Number one is the jaw is so much smaller. There's still the same amount of teeth, right? So dogs have 42 teeth, and a Frenchie has 42 teeth, and a collie has 42 teeth,
mm,
but they're squished into a much smaller space.
mm.
And along with that, the skin that is in that area is squished as well,
Mm,
and the respiratory system. So the bones are what we've chosen for, but I think the soft tissue kind of lags behind, and
mm,
that's where some of our problems come from.
got it. That's kind of great way to describe it because if
Yeah.
you picture, some of them almost have no muzzle. Like if you think about the part of a dog face that goes out, it's really pushed back. So if you think of all the teeth have to get in there somehow and that
And we just saw
skin.
at the shelter, we just saw a bunch of Himalayan or Persian cats that came in on a one group.
Mm,
And I was so surprised that some of the noses of those cats are, like, between their eyes,
wow.
like, the nostrils open, like, right below the eyes.
Yeah.
So there's no upper or lower jaw. We've bred out the mandible and the maxilla.
I'm almost picturing like an old Disney or other cartoon that had an animated like Persian in it and drew it like that. And I'm like, well, I guess they actually were
Finally
anatomically
did it. Yep,
accurate.
finally did it.
Oh my goodness.
Persian cat, she makes me meow forever. Persian cat.
I met one recently and his tongue is just like his tongue's poking out, just at
Yeah,
rest,
yeah.
just sitting out.
Well, in boxers, which isn't even the most severe brachycephalic dogs, sometimes their tongue is so large that when they hang it out, it looks ridiculous.
Mm,
It's
mm-hmm.
like a normal sized dog tongue in this little smushed face.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some stuff from a veterinary perspective that I look at and go, "Ooh, ooh, who designed this?"
Yes, yeah, and it's funny because once you start to think of it that way, it's kind of I like that we talked about the anatomy first because I'm wondering now if the listeners can kind of imagine what might this lead to medically. So, can you talk to us about, like, what are some of the top issues you see in practice with these guys? What are some of the things you worry about medically with them?
Well, there's this whole thing called brachycephalic airway syndrome, and it's a combination of things. So it's the smushed face that causes stenotic nares, which are the little nostrils that are small. So they're so small, air can't get to it all.
Mm,
And there's a way you can correct that, but that's one of the major problems. And cats especially, they're obligate breathers, so they have to breathe through their nose.
mm,
And so when they can't, they're constantly having trouble.
mm, mhm.
Uh, so stenotic nares is one, relatively easily corrected. The other one is redundant soft palate. So the soft palate's in the back part of the throat, the thing that vibrates when we
If
snore,
we go,
not
it's that.
let's say. And the redundant soft palate, like, actually lays down, like, in most animals, it's sitting up above the epiglottis,
Mhm,
but in these dogs and cats both, they hang right on the epiglottis, which is the thing that kinda divides the trachea from the esophagus, so it's constantly in the way.
Mm.
And then they get these everted laryngeal saccules, which are these little things in the back of the throat that, because of the constant negative pressure, because they're working so hard,
Mm.
it pops these little saccules out. And then on top of that, some dogs, and I would say I've seen this the most in English bulldogs and pretty commonly in English bulldogs, is hypoplastic trachea, which is this, like, the trachea is the breathing tube, and
Mm.
normally it's the size of, I'd say in a bulldog, you'd expect it to be at least 3 inches in
Mhm.
diameter,
Mhm.
and sometimes they're a half an inch, three
Wow.
quarters of an inch.
I always
So
forget that
way, way small.
that aspect. I kind of forget about the trachea is sometimes a little different, which is funny.
Right.
Um,
And one of the things I learned, although I've been a vet for a while, like I just learned probably in the last 15 years or so, that in those dogs, because of that constant negative pressure, the stomach acid gets pulled up into the esophagus all the
oh
time.
no.
So the same animals have GERD. It's called GERD in people.
Oh
I don't know if we
no.
call it GERD in animals, but they get the chronic GI problems because they've got this constant negative pressure that's pulling their stomach acid out.
So I picture
So
them
it's not a
almost
good
like
sign.
almost from the time they're a puppy, they're like an old person that's just lived hard,
Yeah,
like
no movement.
snoring, reflexing, like having trouble breathing. And they're just like right off the bat, they're like, this is what life's like. So
Yeah,
it's
they don't
funny.
know any different. And sometimes we just fixed the cat this last week. We did the open nasal surgery, and I looked at it this morning, and the technicians that have been taking care of him said, "Oh my god, like, he's sniffing his food all the time." He's
Oh,
like, "We can't hear him breathing across the room." And I'm thinking, "My god," because this cat didn't know any different. It just
yeah.
knew to breathe through these little, literally, when we did it, it was like the size
Wow.
of the head of a pig.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
so
And when you think of how important, like, the nose is for usually for dogs and cats, it must be, like, opening up this whole new world for them to kind of if you do change that and get them airflow through there.
And imagine, like, when you get a cold, how uncomfortable that is, just the
Mm,
breathing part of it.
mhm, mhm,
Those cats and dogs are feeling that all the time. So, there's some things that are correctable, and there's some things that just they tolerate and seem to do okay. It kinda depends on the animal.
mhm. Well, along with all those problems, they can kind of have the worst thing and the thing that I worry about with adopting a puppy, I feel like they can have these crises sometimes. Maybe not all of them, but if it's like
Yeah.
hot out, I've been thinking about maybe I need to get like a window air conditioner for one room for him or something.
Well, and we do see more heat stroke in
Mm,
Brachycephalic dogs, and the reason for that is because they can't pant as effectively. So
mhm,
panting is a combination of, like, hanging out the tongue and, keeping that air supply going constantly. Well, they're not
mm,
really that good at that,
mhm.
so they heat up more quickly. And the other thing, just from an eye standpoint,
Yeah.
that same thing is true. The whole face is shortened, so the eyes get bulgy.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
And I
Yeah.
noticed yours has that
I
quite
know.
significantly.
It's he's got
Yeah.
crazy eyes, and one of them's, like, just a little off center or something, so he's so cute, but his eyes I know you said to me, "Don't whap him on the back too hard."
Don't whack him on the back of the head, right. Don't, yeah, and that's the thing. Back to your question about, like, well, why have they become so popular? That's why, because they're adorable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we want to help them. And
Yes.
fact is, most of them will live a perfectly normal life that's fine. Maybe
Mhm.
they'll snore a little bit more than anybody in the household. But
Yes.
other than that, they do okay.
Yeah. He is adorable, and I do feel like, for whatever reason they were selectively bred for, he triggers in me this feeling like he's a little humanoid baby. And I know he's a dog, but he just has that little face, and it's very charming. Although it's funny for me as a vet to say that because I'm like, I know like what's going on in there is like also a load of
Electrolyte.
problems.
Well,
So,
to take the pressure off of you,
yeah.
as you may remember, we adopted a teacup Pomeranian that came from
Oh.
a bad situation,
Mhm.
and it's 5 pounds, and
Mhm.
I had to pull all of its teeth out,
Oh.
so it has no teeth,
Mhm.
but it has this teeny tiny face that makes you just, like, wanna eat it.
Yes.
Like, I don't maybe that's not the right word, but
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. You just wanna gobble them up. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is there are people that love these breeds and they have a whole history. I do hope breeders are looking at, selecting for breathing a little more easily or eyes being a little less exposed and irritated.
yeah.
So, hopefully there's a
Yes, and
trend
and
there.
and we've seen in practice that gamut of,
Mhm.
like, some of them are minimally affected and some of them are maximally affected, and I think your point
Mhm.
is well taken, which is the breeder has more control over that than any of us,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We get the animal that has the problems, but the breeder can select over time for the ones that have less respiratory problems, so, yes, heads
Yeah.
up to the responsible breeders that are doing a good job for those breeds.
Yes, yeah, I agree, and if people are looking for those kind of puppies, asking that breeder that kind of question might be a good idea. Do you have any advice for people that have a dog like this, myself or others who have a puppy and they're thinking about how to keep them healthy or good questions for their vet? What you would be thinking about
Good
in
question.
terms of
Yes. Okay. So
that?
one thing, I would say the one thing that you can do as a pet owner, so, you don't have any control over the breeding. You
Mhm.
don't have any control over what's happened in this animal's life before you get it. But the one thing that you do have control over is their weight.
Mm.
And I think Brachycephalic dogs of all breeds suffer from with obesity. Not that
Mm.
they're proportionally more obese, but when they are obese, it
Mhm.
it adds significantly to that problem.
Mhm.
And I think of pugs when I say that the most,
Mhm. Mhm.
because pugs have a genetic predisposition towards the Briggs-Phallic thing, because that's how that's what we've chosen them for. But they
Mhm.
also are predisposed to overeating and obesity. So
Mm.
throughout my career, I've seen so many pugs that have that combination of obesity and respiratory disease,
Mm.
and they are really set up for aspiration pneumonia, regular pneumonia, difficulty
Mhm.
breathing, early death, bottom line.
Mm. That's a really good point. So I think about that with like arthritis or something like that, and it wasn't as much on my mind with these kind of little snarfly smush face dogs. But that's a really good point that adding obesity into that mix is just not going to be helpful.
And if you get a puppy,
Mhm.
talking to a veterinarian about whether it's appropriate to do surgery or not,
Mhm.
those are not so effective as they get older.
Mhm.
But, you've seen some that are minimally affected, they just seem to do fine, and
Mhm.
some that are really in trouble, and I think of the English Bulldog as a common thing. They
Mhm.
come in, if we anesthetize them to do a procedure,
Mhm.
we have trained everyone to keep the endotracheal tube in the
Mhm.
maximum amount of time because that bypasses almost all of the problems.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
it's not an option to keep a endotracheal tube in a pet all the time,
Mhm.
but surgeons can open that up a little bit so that at least they're not struggling as much.
Right.
And as I've looked at a lot of dogs and cats through the years, sometimes I'm like, oh my god, that one would really benefit from it. And some of them I'm like, yeah, I don't know, he's breathing okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a extra procedure. Sometimes it's like really would help a lot. So I
Yeah.
think that's one of those things that a good conversation to have with your veterinarian.
That's a good point. If you're going, like, for example, you might be getting ready to spay or neuter this puppy, and it's a great time to ask them about these kinds of questions. Does any modification need to be made? Obviously, big picture, population wise, responsible breeding and trying to get these features a little more healthy is a
Sure.
better place to start. But down the line, like you're saying, if there's a little bit of a modification that can help that individual animal be healthier, that's a really good point.
Right.
I'm
And
definitely gonna
bad
be
choice for that would to be like do the surgery for the respiratory thing and then breed that animal, right? Because now we know
mm,
that animal is bad enough that it actually needs surgery. You don't want to breed that in.
that is a really good point.
But most animals, like yours, for instance, I mean, they're already neutered by the time you get them.
Mhm.
So you don't have to make that decision. It's not a responsibility issue. It's just a comfort of the animal issue.
Yes.
And so
Well, this is so interesting. Is there anything I didn't ask about that you kind of wanted to bring up about these guys before we
I
wrap up?
I think yeah, a couple things that I think of. So when I first got out of veterinary school, I worked in this practice in Maryland that had breeder that of bulldogs.
Mm,
So right out of school, I saw a tremendous amount of bulldogs, and I will say that the biggest problem that scared the hell out of me as a new veterinarian was they all needed cesarean sections.
mm,
They can't give birth anymore because the shortness of the head also contributes to the wideness of the head.
mm,
And then on top of it, that same characteristic tends to make the dogs have a narrow pelvis.
mm.
So that combination means that many of them can't give birth naturally.
Uh,
And that scared the bejesus out of me as a new veterinarian because those are usually 1 o'clock in the morning. It's just you and the client
Right,
trying to do a cesarean section on
right.
a dog.
I'm glad
But
you brought
nowadays,
that up
yeah,
because I think from the
with more
perspective
emergency
of
practices.
like the extremity of selective breeding going to an extent where they can't actually give birth anymore naturally. Like they're dependent on us to give birth surgically for them. It's kind of startling. Maybe a lot of people don't know that. When you think about also their expensive breeds, part of it
Right,
is because these breeders have to have arrangements with a vet to do the surgeries for them.
right. That was one of the things, I mean, at the time now, of course, I've been a vet for a long time, so the prices are or the costs are no longer accurate, but, that was like a $1,500 thing 35 years ago.
Mm,
So,
mhm,
nowadays, that's easily a $5,000 or $6,000 emergency procedure
mhm.
that has to be somehow or another added into the cost of those dogs, and I have seen since then bulldogs that people bought on purpose, and it's not unusual to pay 8, 10, $15,000 for a bulldog.
Wow.
But I can see from a veterinary perspective that, there's a lot that goes behind that breeder is choosing a lot. I have a small window on this in that the breeder that I worked with always needed cesarean sections. Since then, I've worked with some bulldogs, and most of them need cesarean sections.
Yeah,
Right.
that's really interesting. And did you say there another thing you wanted to share about them
Yeah, the
or
only
bring
other
up?
thing is the eyes. So,
Mhm.
okay, so the whole head is kind of, foreshortened, and the eyes are bulgier, so that's super common. And one of the areas of interest I've had through the years is eye surgery. And as a
Let me
result of
just
that,
interject
that
and say every veterinarian should have a friend veterinarian who likes eyes, and I'm so happy to have you as a friend who likes eye stuff. Thank you, Mark.
thank you. You can send me pictures anytime you want. But one of the things is in Boston Terriers, it's really common that they have so much exposure of the eye that you have to do a permanent medial tarsorrhaphy. So I've done a lot of these
Mm.
where we close the corner part of the eye that's towards the nose
Mm.
because those eyes are so bulgy that they're in, number one, they can't even blink. Some
Mhm.
dogs can't blink completely.
Mhm.
And secondly, those eyes are very exposed to potential trauma. So
Mm.
doing a medial tarsorrhaphy allows you to like close that opening a little bit so that they look more normal and less like the what was that guy's name? Marty Feldman, remember him? He
Who's
was
that?
in Young Frankenstein. He had the bulgy eyes.
Oh, yes, that's
Um,
funny. Well, that's funny
So
that you
that's
mentioned that about Boston's because my little puppy, who's been renamed Pippin, when he's napping, sometimes his eyes are not shut all the way. And I can tell he's fully asleep. And they're just like, they're doing what eyelids want to do. They're like partly closed, but they're just the middle third isn't
right. They're
covered.
like, do you realize the work we have to do to cover this eye?
Like, oh no.
We need help.
I put some eye lube on there or something.
Well,
Which is
and the other thing that we see all the time in Boston's, and one of the reasons that to talk about that procedure is they're so exposed, those eyes are exposed all the time, they get pigmentary keratitis. So
mm,
they get like pigment on their cornea
mm-hmm,
that blocks the vision. And
mm.
you can see it. Like, okay, anybody who's listening to this who has a Boston Terrier that is greater than 3 years old, look at their cornea, and in the corner, I'm going to bet you that instead of being clear, there's like a little dark triangle. And that's because of this chronic exposure.
Mark, you're gonna laugh. You're gonna laugh.
Dog, aren't you?
I'm holding, well, mine is only 3 months, so that would be very disturbing
Oh,
if he
okay.
had that.
So probably too early for pigmentary.
But you're gonna laugh. I'm holding up, maybe you can see on the Zoom.
Genteel.
I bought Genteel because I'm like, these are artificial tears. I'm like, we're just gonna start now. Like, he's just gonna be like, part of life is mom puts drops on my giant eyeballs.
Yes. Because that'll get him used to it when you have to use cyclosporin later.
Oh no. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I never really thought I would be. I was going to ask, do you think I'm crazy to adopt a little dog with a smush face? But apparently you did it too.
Yeah, so I have the 5-pound Pomeranian with no teeth, so don't look to me for me to chastise you over, veterinary adoption decisions. I've also had diabetics with three-legged animals, so, like, I think we just take the ones that
Yeah.
you're thinking, "Ooh, this is gonna be a hard project for somebody. I guess I'll take it."
Yes. He does make me smile, so he's going to be a bit of a project though, like you said. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about these guys. And I mean, especially with their popularity increasing, I think it's a great conversation to have and people thinking about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Any way I can help.
Here's the song Flat Face by Louis Jordan. It was so fun talking with Dr. Mark Hanks about brachycephalic breeds, and I look forward to talking with him, hopefully about other vet and animal related topics in the future. Let's take a listen to my little puppy, and you can get a sense for some of the special sounds that they make. I'm here with my 14-week-old puppy, Pippin, and we are going to play ball and see if you can hear his characteristic little snuffle sounds. Good job. Good kitty. So that was Pippin, who's quite active and adventurous, but hi, buddy. But you certainly can hear his characteristic little snorts. That was an excerpt from Bulldog by the Fireballs. The opinions about flat-faced breeds of dogs and cats in the veterinary profession are almost as diverse as the origins of these breeds are themselves. For this reason, even though I looked, it's hard to find an AVMA or American Veterinary Medical Association statement of opinion about these breeds. Highlighting these diverse opinions is an article on the Veterinary Information Network news service, and this article is called Veterinarians Hash Out Ideas on Welfare of Flat-Faced Pets and is from 2023. And here's a quote from the article. The ascent of a flat-faced dog as the most popular breed in America is stoking debate in the global veterinary community about whether such animals should even exist. A short, broad skull with a snub snout, technically known as brachycephaly, is found in dogs including English bulldogs, French bulldogs, pugs, and Boston terriers, and occurs in other animals such as cats, rabbits, and horses. The condition is associated with a host of health problems, but severity varies, and some brachycephalic animals lead healthy, happy lives. Skipping ahead, the article points out that some European countries, namely the Netherlands and Norway, have banned the reproduction of certain brachycephalic dogs for health reasons. Quote, the clashing interests in the public arena are mirrored within the veterinary community. Some practitioners support breed bans. Some would like to eliminate or modify brachycephalic animals' signature traits through voluntary measures, such as working with breeders and through public education. And some question the premise that the breeds are inherently unhealthy any more than other breeds that are prone to disease, whether hip dysplasia or cancer. My personal opinion about this, I'll just put out there, is that I'm really very much in favor of working closely with breeders and also purchasers of puppies to try to change the culture where these beloved breeds can be selectively bred to be healthier so that they can have the parts that we love about them while not suffering or while having a healthier life. This, I think, is possible because some individuals seem to do quite well. And so if we focus on that, I think we can really bring forth the healthier genes and variations on these dogs and still have them be beloved pets. I think any sort of law or restriction has to be done very carefully because with dog breeds that are beloved, popular, and go back in many cases centuries or millennia, it's very hard from my perspective to consider full breed bans, but I think that a lot can be done to improve these breeds and make them quite a bit healthier and more comfortable. And I think that is something that hopefully breeders and breed owners as well as welfare specialists can get behind. Let's take a look a little bit about what the research shows and how they've showed up in the news. In the AVMA news from 2023, the AVMA does highlight that health screening tests have been rolled out for brachycephalic dog breeds. Researchers and an organization, the Orthopedic Foundation for Animals, have created a grading system about their respiratory issues where it can be graded from not having issues to having extreme issues in a number grading sense. And I personally think this is really exciting because this can form a framework by which we can do selective breeding to select for healthy animals or animals that don't suffer with their respiratory or breathing issues. And this is going to be touched on a little bit in the research that's now coming out. an interesting article is called Owner Awareness, Motivation, and Ethical Considerations in the Choice of Brachycephalic Breeds, Evidence from an Italian Veterinary Teaching Hospital Survey. So this article by Martelli et al. In 2025 really looks at the human side and what the people are thinking about and looking for when they select these brachycephalic breeds. The opening sentence really captures some of the issues here. Quote, brachycephalic dog breeds are increasingly popular worldwide due to their distinctive appearance and calm temperament, often considered ideal for domestic life. However, these same features are associated with serious health problems such as brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, which may compromise animal welfare. When they surveyed owners that were thinking about or choosing these breeds, they were grouped in a couple different categories for why they were looking at them. One was trend-driven. They were looking for aesthetics or appearance and fashion reasons. Another was value-driven, meaning their sort of belief systems. They were looking for the intelligence and behavior of these breeds. Those were the two main reasons, either the sort of fashion and look of the dog or the intelligence and behavior or perception of that for these breeds. The value-driven owners were more likely to talk with veterinarians before purchasing the dogs, and they showed a greater awareness of the breed health-related or medical challenges. The trend-driven or aesthetics-driven owners were influenced more by media and fashion, and they showed lower research or engagement in prevention and talking to a veterinarian about medical challenges. The authors conclude that the findings highlight really the importance of, quote, promoting evidence-based veterinary counseling before purchasing a dog, that veterinarians could support breeders by raising awareness of the ethical implications of selecting extreme traits, ultimately helping to reduce the welfare burden linked to these breeds, end quote. So this is a really interesting article because it talks about how some people are informed of the medical issues and some people just think they look cool in fashion and media and go out and buy one. And so there's really some education, I think, that can be done there to help people understand the sort of medical burden and issues these dogs are going to face. And also helping guide them toward breeders that are breeding responsibly for these medical issues. The last study I wanted to highlight, I think, is really interesting because it starts to take those new grading systems and apply them to research and how to understand these medical issues. It's called a cross-sectional study into the prevalence and conformational risk factors of BOAS, brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, across 14 brachycephalic dog breeds, and this is by Tomlinson et al. From 2026. And what's really cool about this article is it looks at these 14 different breeds using a respiratory functional grading system, or RFG, which is an assessment that's been designed for and adapted for use in these breeds, like we were talking about before, where they can be numerically scored on how difficult it is for them to breathe. And they use that to compare between the breeds and also individual variation within breeds. And what they find is that different breeds vary a lot in terms of how much they struggle with breathing. But they also find that within a breed, and this is similar to what Dr. Mark Hanks was talking about, within a breed, say the English Bulldog, some animals really suffer and some do really quite well and have a pretty comfortable breathing ability, pretty comfortable quality of life in that respect. And so I think this kind of study really highlights how these scores that are being developed can both help researchers understand the variation and document it, but I also think there's some applied possibilities for selecting puppies to go ahead and breed later, both from a breeder perspective and from an owner purchase perspective, doing your research on these breeders and making sure that they're working with veterinarians that are trained to do these respiratory functional grading scores and do some responsible breeding to really try and direct these breeds toward more and more individuals that have comfortable breathing. So yes, there are surgeries that can be done later to help an individual animal be comfortable. And yes, working on their fitness and their body condition score, basically making sure they're not obese, can help prevent problems. But going to the root of the problem with education and advocacy around breeding choices, selectively breeding these to be healthier dogs within these breeds. I think this study really makes me feel optimistic about how these new scores can be potentially used in that way. So I think that's kind of exciting. Let's go and listen to my little puppy Pippin and the sounds of him napping and breathing. And as I mentioned, when he naps, his eyes are often like about a third open, which is concerning in terms of sort of his corneal health. That tear film and blinking are so important to eye health. Also, you'll be able to hear him breathing in a way that sounds a little bit like, like an older person who snores as they're aging, but he's a little puppy. So this really kind of highlights some of the challenges these breeds can face. That's the little puppy breathing while he sleeps. Now let's hear an excerpt from Flatfoot Face by Stan S.B.
I guess I'll just pretend that everything's fine and everyone's friends, and then I fall flat-footed on my face again. Do it up now!
Now we're going to highlight a poem, Pug, by Valerie Worth and Steve Jenkins' book, Pug and Other Animal Poems. With their goggling eyes and stumpy noses, wrinkled brows and hairy moles, they're what some people might call plug ugly, perhaps because, for dogs, they look a lot like people. Thank you so much for joining us for today's exploration of smush-faced dogs or brachycephalic dogs like the Bostons, the Pugs, and the English Bulldogs, and many more. We also discussed a little bit about Persian cats who really face a lot of similar challenges. We focused a bit on dogs because of their rising popularity with these smush-faced dog breeds and the fact that they've been a lot discussed in the news, in the research, and in sort of some controversies and legislation that are coming out. There was a New Hampshire bill that didn't pass recently, but that tackled animal abuse definitions as possibly including the sale and breeding of brachycephalic animals. And it really stirred up quite a bit of discussion and controversy from the AKC to animal advocacy and welfare groups to breeders. It just really caught a lot of attention, was in the news a lot recently. So these things are showing up more and more in the news. And if you catch sight of those or have a dog or are thinking of a dog that's a smush-faced breed, it's really important to know about some of the things that go with these breeds. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and spread the word. I really appreciate your help with that. I will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for a discussion of behavior and training and raising puppies. In the meantime, I'm busy with my own puppy. Until I see you in 2 weeks, keep discovering.